My parents handed me an itemized invoice for $280,000, demanding I pay them back for the cost of raising me. When I refused, they sued me. So, I destroyed their lives with a single phone call to the IRS. Let me explain how we got here. By the time I turned 27, I had signed a lease on a commercial office in downtown Austin. I had hired my sixth employee. I had paid off every single cent of my student loans. And I did all of it without a single dollar from my family. Not a loan, not a cosign, not even a kind word. To you understand why they sued me, you have to understand. My sister, her name is Madison. She's 3 years older than me. And from the moment I could form memories, I understood one undeniable truth. My parents had decided to pour every ounce of their resources into her. It was not subtle. Madison got the SAT tutor. Madison got the car at 16. Madison got the bedroom with the ensuite bathroom. When she made the honor roll, my parents threw a dinner party. When I made the honor roll the very next year, my mother didn't even look up from her planner. She just said, "That's nice, sweetie," and went back to organizing Madison's graduation trip to Italy. I wasn't neglected in the clinical sense. I had food, I had clothes, but emotionally, I was furniture. I was present in the room, occasionally useful, but never actually seen. I stopped waiting to be seen when I was 14. That was the year I bought a secondhand laptop with babysitting money, got on YouTube, and taught myself graphic design. I practiced obsessively. By 16, I was doing $50 logo projects for local businesses. By 18, I had a real portfolio. I knew bone deep that my future was not going to be handed to me. I had to build it myself. I got into a good university on a partial scholarship. My parents contributed nothing. When I asked my father for help once, he told me they had already saved that money for Madison's graduate school. This was the same Madison who had just changed her major for the third time and spent her weekends at her boyfriend's lake house. I never asked again. I worked 25 hours a week at a campus print shop, carried a full course load, and graduated with a modest amount of debt and a solid freelance client list. I moved to Austin at 22 with 2 suitcases and 3 months of rent. I worked at a folding table in a one-window apartment for 2 years. I lived on rice and frozen vegetables. By 24, I was profitable. By 27, my design agency was clearing well over $500,000 a year. I did not call my parents to share any of this. We were not close. Meanwhile, Madison was 30. She had dropped out of 2 graduate programs. She started a business that lasted 8 months before collapsing. And she had just moved back into my parents' house in Ohio, which brings me to a Tuesday morning in March. My mother called me crying. She said she needed to see me urgently. Someone had died. I just knew it. I was wrong. Someone just wanted money. I drove to Ohio that weekend. When I walked into my parents' house, my mother was on the couch. My father was next to her, and Madison was sitting in the corner with her arms crossed. It was an ambush. My mother started talking about how hard they had worked, how much they had sacrificed. She talked in circles for 4 agonizing minutes before she finally got to the point. They had calculated the exact cost of raising me from birth to age 18. Housing, food, clothing, medical care. They had put it in a spreadsheet, and they wanted me to repay it. My father opened a manila folder and slid a piece of paper across the coffee table. The number at the bottom was 280. Oh, I stared at it. Then I looked up at my mother. "You decided to have children," I said quietly. "That was your choice. I did not sign a contract when I was born." My mother rolled her eyes. She said the point was that the family was in financial difficulty. I was successful, and it was time for me to step up. So, I asked the obvious question. "What is Madison's portion of this invoice?" My father immediately said Madison was going through a hard time. I stood up, grabbed my purse, and told them I would not be signing anything. My mother started crying. My father called me selfish. And Madison finally looked at me and said, "You always act like you're better than us." I walked out. For 2 weeks I did nothing. I just let the anger settle into a flat, cold clarity. I had spent my entire life not asking them for a dime. I had built something real from nothing, and their response was to treat me like a delinquent tenant. Then, 3 weeks later, I was in the middle of a client meeting at my Austin office. My office manager knocked on the door. She had a look on her face that I will never forget. She handed me an envelope. It had been delivered by a process server. My parents had found a lawyer. They had actually filed a civil lawsuit against me for the 280. I stood in the hallway holding that envelope. And I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the sheer audacity of it had crossed a line so far past anger that it looped all the way back around to comedy. I called my best friend Renee, who is an attorney. She told me what I already knew. No court in America is going to force an adult child to repay their parents for raising them. The legal theory doesn't exist. They weren't trying to win in court. They were trying to embarrass me into settling. It was a pressure tactic. I hired a ruthless litigation attorney named Patricia. We filed a motion to dismiss, mid-video pattern. Interrupt, but then something happened that I did not see coming. Something that changed the entire trajectory of this war. Madison called me. We hadn't spoken in over a year. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. She didn't apologize for the lawsuit. She didn't even acknowledge it. Instead, she started talking. And what she said over the next 40 minutes completely recontextualized everything. Madison confessed that she had been secretly borrowing money from our parents for a decade. Not small amounts. She had taken nearly $400,000 from them. She blew it on failed graduate programs, a collapsed business, and a lifestyle she couldn't afford. The money was gone. She had absolutely nothing to show for it, and my parents, who had spent 30 years funneling every resource into Madison, were suddenly facing financial ruin. But instead of holding Madison accountable, they did what they always do. They protected her. They looked at the successful daughter, the one they had ignored, and decided to extort her to fix the golden child's mess. I asked Madison if she had told her lawyer about this. She paused. No, I thanked her for her time and hung up. Now here is the part you need to pay very close attention to. I sat down with my attorney Patricia to go over the case. I didn't tell her everything Madison said. I wasn't going to weaponize my sister. But I did tell Patricia that the lawsuit might be a bad faith attempt to cover up my parents' actual financial ruin. Patricia started digging into the background documents my parents had handed over during the discovery phase. And that is when she found it. My parents had been operating a small rental property business on the side for years. But as Patricia reviewed their tax documents and property records, she noticed massive irregularities. Income that was never reported. Deductions that didn't match the properties. My parents were committing tax fraud. And they had been doing it for a long time. Patricia laid out the evidence on her desk. She looked at me and said, "This is not something I can use in the lawsuit. But as a citizen, you have a choice to make." I sat with that for 3 days. These were my parents. Whatever they had done to me, whatever they had failed to give me, they were still my family. Reporting them to the government felt like pushing a button that couldn't be unpushed. But then I thought about the $280,000 invoice. I thought about the process server at my office. I thought about the fact that they were willing to lie in a court of law to steal money I had bled for, just to cover up the fact that their favorite child had drained them dry. I had spent my entire life building something honest. I was not going to let them drag me into their rot. I filed a formal whistleblower report with the IRS. The lawsuit was dismissed 4 months after it was filed. The judge took less than a single page to explain that demanding a refund for raising a child was legally absurd. My parents were ordered to pay my legal fees, but that was just the beginning. The IRS investigation took longer, but the irregularities Patricia found were very real. The investigation confirmed a multi-year pattern of tax evasion. My parents are now facing a massive financial and legal reckoning. Fines, penalties, and potentially criminal charges. They did that. Not me. I only reported what was true. Madison hasn't contacted me since that phone call. She is presumably still living in the house, watching it all fall apart. 6 months after the lawsuit was dismissed, my mother sent me an email. It was 2 paragraphs long. The first paragraph said I had destroyed the family. The second paragraph said she hoped I was proud of myself. I read it twice. Then I closed my laptop, laced up my shoes, and went for a long walk along the river trail near my apartment. An apartment I recently bought, with money I earned. Standing there by the water, I tried to figure out what I actually felt. Not proud, not vindicated, something quieter than that. I felt free. Not because of what happened to them, but because of what didn't happen to me. I didn't settle. I didn't write a check to buy their approval. I didn't let them make me smaller just to make them comfortable. If you are watching this and you grew up as the invisible child, the one who was never quite enough, the one who watched every resource flow in a different direction, listen to me very carefully. You're not an investment. You were not born to generate returns. Loving you was never supposed to be a transaction. If the people who were supposed to love you have spent years treating you like a line item, build your life anyway. Build it honestly. Build it without asking for their permission. The most satisfying moment in this entire story wasn't the judge dismissing the case. It wasn't the IRS knocking on their door. It was the moment I realized I had already won. Years ago, sitting at a folding table in a one-window apartment in Austin, when I decided my worth was not up for debate, they didn't lose because of me. They lost because of every choice they made long before they ever opened that folder. And I got to keep everything I built. If this story hit you, type invisible in the comments right now. I read every single one. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.